This is Hart Hagan with the Climate Report, and I'm here with Nick Alden. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing good. I'm glad to be here.
Great. So the purpose of the Climate Report is to solve the problem of climate change. And one of the most important things I've learned in recent months has been somewhat surprising, and that is the importance of grazing animals, not only in storing carbon, but also increasing soil health. Healthy soil is good for is good for storing carbon. It's good for storing water. Healthy soil is good for biodiversity. It's good for pollinators, birds, small mammals, etc. So Nick and I are going to talk about the work of Alden Savory and something called planned holistic management or planned holistic grazing. And Nick, tell me about that. What is it? What are we talking about there, and why is it important?
Well, sure. Well, I think it's important to keep in mind that during the last ice age, during the Pleistocene, there were more large animals in North America than there are on the Serengeti today. So healthy ecosystems have large numbers of animals in them. What they do, a lot of these animals, like elephants, for example, they break apart the soil with their feet and they urinate and they defecate on the ground. And this provides nutrients for the soil. In fact, large herds of animals do a lot to basically they plow, till, and fertilize the soil.
So that stands in contrast to what we're hearing today. We hear that we need a plant-based diet because eating too much meat is bad for the environment, etc. But we're saying that grasslands actually need more animals on them.
Oh yes, many more. Then the key thing is there's an exact amount. So animals in Australia evolved to graze differently than in North America, and some environments are drier. That's why you need to do the holistic management. You need a decision-making framework that knows exactly what the right amount to put on the land is. The key thing is they need to not stay in one place for too long.
Yeah. So there's overgrazing and there's undergrazing. Usually overgrazing, so undergrazing is when there aren't enough animals on the land, period. Overgrazing is sometimes called continuous grazing because it's not about having too many animals on the land. It's about having them be able to graze in one area for too long, and that area does not have a chance to recover. Am I on the right track with that?
Yes. And this is what Alden Savory and the experts discovered. I'm not an expert, but what they basically, the problem is that the animals, if they stay in one place for too long, it's like constantly plowing your garden every single day of the year. It's overkill, and it destroys the soil, prevents it from having a chance to recover and build up.
Right. So when I think of plant, so this is a form of biomimicry. Biomimicry is when we're mimicking what nature does. It's not the cow, it's the how. It's not the fact that we have cows, it's the fact that the cows and their food are not raised under circumstances that mimic what they did in nature. So if you want to look and see what, for example, cows did in nature, look at the bison in North America. They would travel northward for half of the year and graze, and then they would travel southward for half of the year. So they would graze intensively for a day or two, and then they're continually moving on. Wherever they graze and trample, poop and pee, that land has a chance to recover. So and it's fertilized, and when they use their hoofs, they're working in the organic matter. Whereas if grass just grows and doesn't have any animals, then it tends to shade itself out. There tends to be too much, dead organic matter, and it's bad for the grass. The grass is not getting what it wants.
I'm trying to figure out what people think grasslands are supposed to be like if they don't think there's supposed to be big animals on them. I thought for a while they think it's like your lawn, that you're just supposed to let it grow. But I realized even lawns need to be mowed. And not just to keep the grass down, they need to be mowed for the grass's health. So I'm trying to figure out what the analogy is. It's not like a forest where you let it rest and leave it rest and it'll come back.
Right.
So there's also this attempt to focus only on the rainforest and the very real environmental degradation that happens there for cattle ranching. I've noticed that nobody seems to be well, not nobody, but I've noticed that the critics of Allen Savory, they're not impressed when you bring up the fact that you can actually do this on grasslands to great ecological benefit.
Right. And why is that? Why are they not impressed?
Probably because it violates this sense of what, well, it gets back to the idea of the transgression against nature, that they've remapped the classical worldview. It violates the idea of scarcity, the idea they're holding on to scarcity. They're holding on to the idea that the world is scarce, has scarce resources, and we need to change our behavior. It's more about punishing people. And it goes back again to the Malthusian worldview, and it goes back to the socialist worldview, and it goes back to the remapping of the classical worldview onto the modern world. The whole mindset is almost like a narrative. Like they anticipated what we were going to say, and we came up with something completely different. We're not behaving according to a script. The script is people only want to eat meat because it tastes good, not because it's nutritious, not because it has any benefit to the environment. When you present the reality that was discovered after the environmental movement really got going, you know, they're stuck in the script. Well, hold on, this can't be true. It's not something that exists within that framework. So it's part of why I say we need to go after this particular brand of poison.
So let's talk about, how do we promote? So, planned holistic grazing is good. Regenerative farming, generally speaking, is good. Let's talk about, what are the different ways in which we can promote regenerative farming as opposed to what I call degenerative farming. So for one thing, we can be informed and be able to be immune to the lies that are floated, like the merits of a plant-based diet, etc. For another thing, we can buy our food from local regenerative farms. We can be informed about where our food comes from. So am I on the right track with that?
Oh yeah, we need to. So the Savory Institute has their land to market system. They actually have a list of brands that they've certified: Applegate, Force of Nature, Epic Jerky, Zook's dog food. These are things that we need to be buying in abundance. But if we do this, we alleviate the cruelty of factory farming and we restore soil. So I think it's on the whole a very good thing to do.
Mhm. So let's look at what is the current alternative to planned holistic grazing. The current alternative is that if you grow meat, then you're raising a lot of corn and soy for animal feed. The corn and soy and maybe to some extent wheat, I'm not sure, but certainly corn and soy, these are genetically modified organisms. They're raised with glyphosate. They're raised with toxic chemicals. They're raised in monocultures. And it has the effect of degrading the soil. When you raise a monoculture of corn or soy, and when you spray the ground with glyphosate, you're creating all these toxic chemicals that go into our food, into our water. Plus, it's a monoculture. A monoculture doesn't have what nature needs. So nature, whether it's pollinators, whether it's birds, butterflies, small mammals, they need a diversity of things to live. And we're not giving nature what it needs to live when we grow our food in chemically drenched monocultures.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why we've seen pollinating insects and many species of flowers that were supposed to be extinct come back in places where this was done. It's like I've realized going in as I got more and looked more into this, holistic management undoes climate change. It is like it cures everything except baldness. And maybe it cures that too. Maybe there's some nutrients or that we need that we're not getting, or some pesticides that we are getting that make us go prematurely bald. I mean, I wouldn't put it past even that, maybe, because the cause of climate change is landscape uses in a way that we don't realize, or at least that's one of the major causes.
Right. So one of the reasons to promote regenerative agriculture is nutrition. So nutritional food is grown in an environment that's biologically diverse. Think of a farm that has multiple types of grazing animals, multiple types of birds. You got chickens and ducks and turkeys. You've got pigs, goats, and cows. Think of a farm that has multiple types. You have biologically diverse wooded areas. You have biologically diverse grasslands. You have a garden that has biodiversity. You're allowing bees and butterflies to pollinate the flowers. You have a soil ecosystem underneath the soil. And without that soil ecosystem, nutrition doesn't get delivered to your food. So what does it take to make a nutritious plant? It takes a functioning soil ecosystem. We kill that functioning soil ecosystem when we till and when we apply chemical fertilizers and pesticides. So it's very important for us to go in this direction for nutrition and to relieve ourselves of toxic chemicals. And that if we do that, we're going to find that we are cured of any number of diseases.
We're also going to find more water. The main reason I do this is I don't want people to go thirsty. There are many parts of the world where you can't grow trees, where you can't grow food for animals, for anything other than animals. Like where you can't just grow stalks of corn for your own consumption. You have to have animals because they're the only thing that can eat what grows in that environment. Like in the Sahel, in the Horn of Africa, there's large parts of those regions where you need animals in order to sustain yourself.
So how does that work? So what's the connection between grazing and water?
It's all about the soil. That's what the connection is. The soil holds more water when it's healthy because there's more roots that hold it together and prevent it from crumbling. And then the roots, they hold, more carbon. But basically there's more microbes. There's just more structure, and the structure prevents the water from eroding away. When you go to many of these hot, dry parts of the world, even in deserts, it's not that they don't get rain. It's that they get lots of rain for part of the year for short periods. And all that rain evaporates or runs off unless you have healthy soil to hold it.
Right. I like to think of, Gabe Brown wrote Dirt to Soil. It's an excellent book. It's one of the best books I know of from a farmer's perspective about how to be good to the soil so that the soil is good for you. And there was a time in 2009, Gabe is in North Dakota, and normally they get about 16 inches of precipitation per year, including the snow. But on this one day in 2009 in the summer, they got 22 inches of rain. No, they got 13 inches of rain in 22 hours. So they got over a foot of rain in less than a day. So at Gabe's farm, the rainwater soaked into the ground. And that means there's less runoff. That means there's less erosion. That also means Gabe's farm is more drought proof because the soil has structure, it holds the water, and it makes that water available to the plants. It means that water is then released slowly into the waterways so that the waterways run again. But if all of that land is like his neighbor's land, which has been conventionally farmed for over 100 years, then that water rushes into the streams. Warm, polluted water rushes into the streams, and then the streams dry up. So the streams flood and drought, flood and drought. I've heard it said that a desert is not a place that gets a low amount of rainfall, but it's a place that when it rains, it floods. And when it floods, that water is rushing into the waterways, rushing into the ocean where it's not needed, instead of being held back on the land where it's available for plants, animals, and for people for drinking water.
Deserts are places that don't have enough water to monitor the temperature. Water stabilizes the temperature. It's why it gets so cold at night in deserts. I don't know how we associate deserts solely with the heat and the sun. They're very much places devoid of life.
Right.
Or with less life, but they need not exist.
Yeah, exactly. So, recently in the news, not only the American West in the news is like, oh, we have this heat wave. We have these droughts that are caused by CO2. Well, that's pathetically oversimplified. Also, Madagascar is in the news. On time.com, it said Madagascar has the first famine caused solely by climate change. And what they mean, it's climate change because it's desertification. The climate there is changing, and that climate causes a famine. Not the first time ever a famine has been caused due to desertification, which is in turn caused by drought. But you're saying that's preventable. You're saying that's optional. You're saying that we don't have to. That doesn't have to be something people have to live with.
What I'm confused by is how a environment that has lost 90% of its forest, like Madagascar, how you can blame that only on climate change.
Oh yeah, it's stupid. It's stupid
because it really has lost
commercial.
90% of its forest. That island has lost that much of its native forest. But it's you bring back the forest. The similar thing happens with the water. There's this man named Willie Smits. He works in Indonesia, and he actually regrew a whole rainforest without doing it next to another forest. He just went into this completely barren place in East Kalimantan, and he grew it in a rainforest out of nothing by using orangutan feces to make a kind of compost, and by putting sugar palms around the edge of this forest so that the fires couldn't destroy it. And the rain came back. The rain always comes back when the plants come back.
Right. So what's the larger theme? What lessons do we need to take from that?
Well, we need to restore ecosystems to as much. It's always tricky to say exactly what normal is, but I would say we should be trying to get things as close to what they were like 9,000, 10,000 years ago as we can. That would be my personal goal. Something like that would probably be good. And the way you do that is by returning grasslands to grasslands and forests to forests. We put too much of an emphasis on planting trees.
Right.
So we need to also think about the grasslands.
But commercial interests love that narrow emphasis.
Oh, they do.
Because it keeps them out of the spotlight. Agribusiness loves it when you blame everything on CO2, even though they generate a lot of CO2 by making the nitrogen fertilizers. They generate a lot of CO2 because every year that you plow the ground, you're releasing carbon into the atmosphere. And then you can position ethanol as somehow renewable, but generally speaking, the commercial interests love a narrow focus on carbon, a narrow focus on fossil fuels, a narrow focus on tree planting, because it just, give yourself a lobotomy while you listen to the news. It's the same thing. Anyway, but
yeah. So I'm just trying to identify and other people many smarter than me have already figured out where the bad frameworks are coming from. I'm just trying to figure out how to get more people to notice them as bad.
Right. Well, people don't know that his last name is Schmitz. People don't know that you can recreate a rainforest. For one thing, they don't know that all forests are rainforests if you really look at it, but we can reverse desertification. So how do we reverse desertification, Nick?
We need to get a lot more animals on the land so that they can rebuild the soil. If they rebuild the soil, the water will come back. That'll store carbon. It'll cool the temperature down, and it'll allow the ecosystem to come back. The large deserts of the world, many of them are man-made. They don't have to be. They can be unmade.
That's a great place to end it. Thank you so much. We're going to talk about this next time. How's that?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.